Good morning, Manchester, and welcome to Hour 3 of Girard at Large. I am your host, Richard Girard. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to bring this half hour to you commercial-free, courtesy of our friends at goffstowntoday.com. That's goffstowntoday.com. If you want to know what's happening in the towns of Goffstown, Ware, New Boston, or Dunbarton, hey, if you really want to know what's happening in Pinardville, you go to goffstowntoday.com. They are a friend and partner of our show. We appreciate their support, and if you're in that, if you want to know what's happening in those communities, goffstowntoday.com is where you go. We are going to bring it to you commercial-free because we're with Governor Buddy Roemer. He's been a guest on our show twice. We know that you folks have liked him because you've lit up our Facebook page, which, by the way, is Girard at Large, and our website, which is girardatlarge.com. Feel free to submit your questions, but the governor made an interesting statement before we went on the air. He said, "I'd like to get some people calling this morning. I want to talk to the folks." So that's an invitation for you to call 647-1250. That's 647-1250, where you can ask your question of presidential candidate Buddy Roemer. Governor Roemer, thank you for joining us this morning here on Girard at Large.
Good to be here, Rich. This is multiple crimes I've had with you. So, I've got to keep myself under control this morning. I promise.
That's a repeat offender. No, we don't. Hey, listen, we get some very interesting feedback from our listeners last time. We thought you did a great job sort of laying out the case, what the issues were and what needs to be done here in the United States of America.
Right. And as I said then, Rich, I'm concerned both short and long term about our country. I think we're in serious difficulty.
And you did a pretty convincing job last time of laying out, making your case, I guess. So I think what we need to do is jump into some of what you see are the solutions. And I want to focus on a couple areas, well, three really, at least initially. And again, we're taking your calls at 647-1250. At the request of Governor Roemer, you don't often have a guy say, gee, I hope people will ask me questions. I think I just read a news article about another candidate who held a town hall in Bedford here yesterday, made a 15-minute speech and left, no questions asked.
Wow.
That was Governor Romney. And that was in today's newspaper. So, Governor, let's tackle the issue of health care first.
All right.
It's first and foremost on a lot of people's minds. We've got this Obamacare monstrosity that's hanging out there.
Right.
First of all, I assume that you would be in favor of repealing Obamacare.
I would. I like some provisions. I'm a diabetic. I've been a diabetic for more than 40 years. I wear an insulin pump. I think the quality of our health care in America is the best on earth. I think the costs are unnecessarily high. Let me say it again. I think the costs are unnecessarily high. And I would approach a systemic lowering of costs. Here's how I would do it. Obamacare goes that the government is the solution. I disagree. I think the government is the problem. His plan was bureaucratic, raised health care costs, was a sop to insurance companies, which didn't have to compete, was a handoff to pharmaceutical companies, which didn't have to compete, was a salute to tort lawyers. There was no tort reform. And finally, there were no incentives to health care providers to save documented costs while maintaining quality. My approach would be just the opposite. I wouldn't start with lawyers, hospitals, insurance companies, or pharmaceuticals. I would start with doctors, patients, and nurses. We'll start from a different place. Number two, we will require insurance companies to compete. They are protected now. They are deliberately under Obamacare, not under the Sherman Antitrust Act. They're the only industry in America, besides organized baseball, not under the Sherman Antitrust Act. As a result, there are 50 monopolies in America. Each state has its own monopoly. And if you don't believe me, here's a test for you. See if you can buy medical insurance across the state line. You can't. Therefore, your selection is limited, your choices is limited, and what happens when that happens? Price goes up. Number three, I would require pharmaceutical companies to give price discounts for large segments of the population who use their drugs. For example, seniors. I'm 68 years old, I'm a senior. The biggest cost of my health care is pharmaceutical costs, insulin and other related medicine. You know, we're the only nation in the industrial world that does not allow pharmaceuticals to give price discounts or to allow fair competition from Canada, both of which would lower costs for health care. Number 3, I would have tort reform. The biggest, one of the biggest, I don't want to exaggerate, about 8% of the cost of health care is legal cost. One of the biggest drivers of that are frivolous lawsuits. Once again, at the federal level, we've avoided every opportunity we've had to penalize those who have frivolous lawsuits by making the loser pay for the cost. Finally, I would allow all medical providers to document their costs over the course of a year. And if they can show a 10% increase in lowering costs over the course of that year, if they can document, I would let them keep 25% of everything they save. Now, we need to do more, but you won't do anything until you put doctors, nurses, and patients in the room to start with, and you make those 4 changes in the system. I predict that we can lower healthcare costs by as much as 20% in the next 3 years. You know what the projection is under Obama's plan? Up 26% in 3 years. I think we can lower the cost by 20% in those 3 years, and the difference is 46% savings in your medical cost.
Girard, our time is 8:15. We are interviewing Governor Buddy Roemer, former governor and congressman from Louisiana, about his presidential bid in the Grand Old Party. Taking your calls at 647-1250, that's 647-1250. If you have any questions for the governor, he's eager to answer them. So, Governor, you mentioned...
Unless you're a lawyer, an insurance executive. Oh, excuse me, I'm kidding.
I'm joking. Hey, I want those calls. It's going to be good radio.
Yeah, come on.
Well, you know, I agree with you about the insurance companies being able to sell across state lines and improve competition.
Simple.
But, you know, one other thing that we never take a look at, it seems to me in this discussion, is the repeal of federal mandates that are imposed on the health insurance companies. Everything from pre-existing condition coverage to a whole variety of different things. And the states have been there have been some pretty notable instances here where the state of New Hampshire has forced employers to discontinue their health insurance.
Well, you know why this happens, Rich? Once you get in the trick bag of structuring competition rather than encouraging competition, then you can't stop. Well, the government has to unconstitutionally mandate everything. Well, because they set up this bogus system where an insurance company can't sell medical insurance across the state line. By the way, you know why that happened? Money. They're the largest contributor to congressmen and presidents and senators. It's called money. When I got elected to Congress in 1981, I went to Congress. I'm a baby freshman. I'm 36 years old, ready to change the world. One of the first calls I got on my first day, by the way, I ran for Congress taking no PAC money. I wouldn't allow any contributions outside my congressional district. I was the only member of Congress to do that. Only member of Congress to do that. One of the first calls I got, my first day, I never will forget it. After as a Democrat, I voted against Tip O'Neill for Speaker. So I went back to my office very proud of myself, and the phone was ringing. It was the Speaker, Tip O'Neill, calling. What the hell are you doing, Roemer? Anyway, the second call I got was from an insurance executive. So he said, I didn't meet him. He said, I'm so-and-so, I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, or St. Louis, Missouri. I represent the Insurance Association, and we have a check for you. And I said, for what? He said, well, as a great member of Congress, we want to support you. I said, well, is this a PAC? He said, yes, it's a $5,000 check, and we'd like to come by your office and give you the money. I said, keep it. I don't take PAC money. I guarantee you, if you talk to your 2 congressmen from New Hampshire, one of the first phone calls they got was with a big check from insurance companies. That's how this system gets polluted, Rich. It's not for the patients. It's not for the sick. It's not for the taxpayer. It's for the special interest. And they buy Congress. You're going to ask me at some point in this show, what's the solution, buddy? How do you deal with immigration? How do you deal with health care? How do you deal with a budget that hadn't been in balance in a lifetime? How do you deal with tax reform? Let me give you a real straightforward answer. You get the money out of the room and put the people first. All things follow the people.
What would your well, before I get on to that, I want to ask you about what your campaign finance reforms would look like, but I have a listener question here from Joe in Manchester. It says, Roemer equates insurance to a cell phone. The more you make, the cheaper it is. Wrong. Insurance is a risk. Also, insurance companies differ by their billing methods and what they cover. That increases the billing complexity for providers and increases costs. Your comments?
You know, these are good arguments, but they miss the point entirely. If I have the only insurance company in the world, I can charge whatever I want. They can be accountants, they can be this and that. Baloney. What we need is more competition. What we need, do you think that insurance prices are just related to the risk involved? No, sir. They're related to what the insurance companies can get away with. Here's what I want. I like insurance. I like the availability of it. I just want choice and competition. And I'll give you a guarantee. Prices will fall.
Well, choice and competition will do that, but don't we also have to deal with the issue of the mandates placed on insurance companies and what they have to provide by the state?
We do, but once again, Rich, you have to get out of the government-run insurance business. And when the government says, okay, guys, we're going to allow you to have a monopoly in each state. We're not going to put you under the Sherman Antitrust Act. You get what you want. But in return, we get the right to tell you who you can insure and who you can't insure. So, how do you change that? You put the insurance companies under the choice and competition of the Sherman Antitrust Act, and you get the government out of the business. That's how you get rid of the mandates. You'll never change the mandates, Rich, never, until you get the government out of the business and their money out of the pockets of congressmen.
Well, let's get into the campaign finance reform. It seems to be a pretty good jump from here. What would campaign finance reform? What would campaign financing look like under President Reagan?
7 things. 1, full disclosure. Most of the money spent in politics today is not disclosed. You don't know where Mitt Romney gets his super PAC money from. You don't know where John Huntsman gets his super PAC money from.
Well, it's his father, according to
in that case, we can guess, but, you know, we don't know for sure.
No,
be fair to John, we don't know for sure. The law allows super PACs to give unlimited amounts of money. They treat corporations like they're people, and we'll never find out about it. My first rule that I'll ask Congress to adopt is full disclosure. Conservatives like me think sunlight is the best cure. Full disclosure. Now, liberals want limits. I've had this debate for 40 years, since I first went to Congress. Actually, 31 years ago. But even before I went to Congress, I talked about this problem. We need to make sure that we let sunlight into the system. Number 2, I would have PAC contributions equal individual contributions. In other words, under the current law, individuals can give $2,500, PACs can give $5,000. I would bring PACs down to $2,500. It's fair, it's broad.
Let me ask you a question about that, Governor.
All right.
Because if conservatives don't like limits and liberals do, then why wouldn't we have a system where any corporation, any PAC, any individual could give as much money as they wanted to any candidate or any party or any PAC, as long as there was full disclosure of the donation?
And that's a system that I like. The only problem with that system, in an age where the special interests and the big corporations are so dominant in our economy that they could actually buy an election. And the reporting requirements are so lax. For example, I would change reporting to 48-hour disclosure. Under current law, it's 120